We've got 4 ranked matchups this weekend, and it all kicks off on Friday night where 2 Michigan schools square off with first place in the Big Ten on the line.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey gang, what's up? Happy Friday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. This is Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Shade, and it's weird because we're flipped from our usual spots on the screen. I'm literally flipping us in real time, so it feels comfortable. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Want to remind you can catch every single one of these episodes ad-free on Amazon Music. We got a special shout out for the everydayers joining us, and of course, all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord, where we're talking college hoops all day long. I can't get enough of it. This episode's brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Andy, coming up on the show today, as is usually the case, we've got just about every AP Top 25 ranked team in action. The lone non-team or the only team that's not doing that is Maryland, who hosted USC. I guess they weren't very kind hosts. They took bonkers care of USC on Thursday night. Coming up, though, on the show today, we've got 9 bubble teams against ranked opponents. Big opportunities for all of them. We got Duke and Illinois stepping out of conference play to square off in the Garden this weekend. And, Johnny's UConn round 2. It's maybe lost a little luster with UConn not being as good as they thought, but I am very excited for the second matchup here. But, Andy, before we can even sniff any of that, we've got 4 ranked matchups this weekend, and we're not even going to start with the 2 top 10 tilts because tonight, to kick it all off, number 14 Michigan State at Michigan, number 12, 8 Eastern on Fox. FanDuel has it. Wolverines -2.5. Andy, this is the first of their 2 matchups. The return game in East Lansing to wrap the regular season, but first place is on the line in the Big Ten. Let me set this up, and then we'll see your thoughts on this game. Michigan leads the way in the Big Ten standings right now, but just by a half game over Michigan State. What are you seeing happening in this one?
Yeah, it's shout out to the schedule makers for the Big Ten, because we've talked about it throughout the season, how there's always Big Ten games basically every day of the season. It feels like there's like 1 or 2 days where there wasn't at least one Big Ten game. So we always had matchups to talk about. We always had opportunities to kind of look at this conference, and for them to have been able to get, I mean, obviously it's a little bit of luck, but to get it so that this first matchup between these 2 programs lines up with whoever wins this game ends up in first place in the Big Ten, and then presumably sets up the rematch game in East Lansing to be in a similar position, if not the exact same position, is just incredible. I mean, and obviously a huge shout out to Michigan and Dusty May and the program that he's kind of rebuilt from the Juwan Howard era has been extraordinary. You know, I think we all had pretty high expectations for Coach May, just knowing what he was able to do at Florida Atlantic and kind of have that, not just the great Final Four run, but back it up with another strong follow-up season and that incredibly talented roster of players staying together. And for him to have been able to bring Vlad Golden with him to Michigan, rebuild the roster with other, additions that didn't get a ton of fanfare in the offseason. I mean, people talked about Danny Wolf, but not to the extent of what he has actually done in a Michigan uniform and putting himself in the conversation as a potential first-round NBA draft pick with the skill set that he has and the way that he's been utilized in that system. It's been incredibly fun to watch. I'm a huge fan of this Michigan team, and that's to take nothing away from the fact that Tom Izzo seems to do this every single year and always has Michigan State in the conversation. And even when they had their year where they were a top 5 team and really fell out with that early season loss to James Madison, like that team still turned it around and did well. And this team is a lot of the similar players, and they're in a great spot. So this is a really fun matchup. I'm excited about the 2 matchups that seem like they're going to have a huge determination on the 2 seed line in the NCAA tournament, with 5 and 8 facing each other in the Big 12 and 6 and 7 facing each other in the SEC. But first place on the line in the Big 10 between 2 rivals, when one of those programs is fully rebuilt from being in the middle of a disastrous era, it doesn't get a whole lot better than that. This is going to be a great game tonight.
So well said, Andy, and a great reminder of what you said about Dusty May, that there are no excuses in the portal era for not
Mhm.
flipping things quickly. And it's interesting. It feels like these two teams not are going in different directions, but Michigan has won 6 straight after starting Big Ten play 6-2, while Michigan State, after starting 9-0 in Big Ten play, is 3-3 in their last 6. Although, of course, their last win was over Purdue. The one before that was over Illinois, which is struggling a little bit. But Michigan also, one of their last 2 wins was over Purdue. So Boilermakers consequently sitting there staring up at both these teams. Andy, let's get to the top 10 matchups. We've got number 6 Tennessee at number 7 A&M. That's tomorrow on noon Eastern on ESPN. And the reason I grouped these together is because immediately following that, we get the second top 10 ranked matchup. Number 8 Iowa State at number 5 Houston, Saturday 2 Eastern on ESPN as well. Andy, let's just take these in chronological order here. We've got SEC top stuff on the line here, but as you know, even though these two teams are ranked 6th and 7th in the nation, they're still sitting there staring up at Auburn and trying to figure things out. But the winner puts themselves in good position. What are you looking at here in College Station?
Yeah, it's a fun matchup between a team that in Texas A&M that is very effective despite not having a super high efficiency, which might work against a Tennessee team that is good defensively and likes to kind of limit teams getting a lot of good opportunities. For A&M, they're a great rebounding team. They get a lot of offensive rebounds. And I think if they can beat Tennessee on the glass, even if they don't have a particularly great shooting night, I think they can absolutely win this game, especially at home. If Wade Taylor does what Wade Taylor can do, and he goes out and has a big game and takes over this game from an offensive standpoint, that's going to be very, very difficult for Tennessee. But we've also seen A&M. I mean, this is a team that they're able to be effective without being super efficient until they're not. And sometimes you can see them have some kind of inexplicable games where they're not able to get anything generated on offense and they really struggle. And against a Tennessee team that is perfectly willing to play a low scoring game, is perfectly willing to not to keep you uncomfortable. If A&M can't find a rhythm, even if they are crashing the glass, I could see Tennessee, especially if they can get Chaz Lanier going, if Zakai Ziegler can break down the A&M defense, I could certainly see that being a good one for Tennessee. Again, both these teams in that 2-seed conversation right now. A&M, I think of a loss here for A&M after a loss earlier in the week and being at home, I think that probably puts them in a much more precarious position. I think you're probably looking at being more in that 3-seed conversation at that point for Tennessee. If they can go get a road W against a top 10 team, that really cements their place as a 2-seed and potentially puts them in that conversation, depending how the rest of the regular season goes. Of course, with Florida's kind of hanging on to that last 1 seed, I could see Tennessee sneaking their way into that conversation. Of course, depending what happens in Iowa State and Houston, which will also have some 1-seed implications as well.
Yeah, both these teams top 5 in Ken Palm defensive efficiency should be a lot of fun in that regard. But again, even though these teams are top 10 in the nation, A&M is tied for 4th in the SEC with Tennessee sitting there tied for 6th. That's just how good this conference is, Andy. But then we go to the Fertitta Center, number 8 Iowa State at number 5 Houston. Houston's starting to run away with the Big 12 a little bit here, 2 games up in the Big 12 standings over Arizona at 12-3. But it's interesting, Andy. This is unfortunately the only matchup between these two teams. Iowa State has been the team of the two that has struggled a little bit of late. Houston was 4-3 at one point this season, Andy. Now they're 22-4, meaning that they've gone 18-1 in their last 19 games. That's crazy stuff. Iowa State, as we know, scuffled a little bit there without Milan Momcilovic and then other factors, right? Like that's not the only thing, but I think that was the biggest thing. Now he's back. Again, this is the only matchup between these two things. Iowa State has a chance to really make a statement to say, we were the team that everybody thought we were before that little stretch where we lost 4 out of 6. Is there a chance the Cyclones can go into Houston and take care of work here? Ken Palm has it Cougars -9.
Yeah, there's a chance. There's a chance. I think the more likely outcome here is that Houston wins. They hold home court. Obviously, they've lost at home this season already, so it's not like unprecedented that that could happen. But I think Houston probably wins this one, and I think that really, fully cements them not only as the Big 12 very likely champion, barring a catastrophic end of the regular season for the Cougs. I think it puts them in a position of like, we are the team to beat. I think a win here very likely puts Houston in the conversation as a 1 seed. Again, depending what happens with like Florida and Alabama, to that matter. If Alabama loses to Kentucky after having lost to Auburn, that puts Bama as to Mizzou, that puts Alabama probably off the 1 line. That likely, I would think, would elevate Houston into that conversation. I think justifiably so. If those results were to hold, even if Alabama beats Kentucky, I could see Houston over Iowa State giving them the bump. Not that Mizzou lost a bad loss by any stretch. Mizzou's a very, very good team, but I think that would be enough of a difference for Houston to potentially climb into that number 1 seed spot. But that's not to say Iowa State can't win this game. They absolutely can.
No, absolutely.
And I think it'll be really interesting to see how the front court, the Joshua Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson and Brandon Chatfield, who are all very good rebounders and physical players, how that goes up against Houston's front court, especially Tugler, the way he's been playing as of late. Like, this is just a really fun matchup of just hyper physical front courts, and to say nothing of the backcourt matchup, which is great as well. That's great. Yeah, but I'm very excited about how these two teams duke it out in Houston Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, Andy, that's a great point about the 1 seed. That's a great big picture conversation. I almost said big pigger. He's a big pig. Ooh, you can be a big pig too. Boy. Yes, I have children, and Lion King is always happening. But very seriously, Andy, when the top 16 reveal happened last week, obviously we had 3 SEC teams on the 1 line and 5 of the top 6 if we're zooming out a little more. Yeah. But it feels like at some point, yes, I know the SEC is so strong, but as they beat all up on each other, if Houston can really run away with the Big 12 and then win the Big 12 tournament, I don't know how you could deny them a 1 seed. So we'll see how that all plays out. But Andy, we've got to quickly get to the other ranked matchup. Number 17, Kentucky at number 4, Alabama, Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Yet again, I mean, it's just one of those days, folks. FanDuel has the lineup already. Alabama -7.5. Andy, big story here is this could be a game that goes to about 120 points each. Last time they played, it was 102-97 with Alabama winning in Rupp Arena. Both teams get over 100 here because, I don't know, Kentucky's defense with Lamont Butler being out, they have struggled, my man.
Yeah, I mean, Mizzou and Alabama basically delivered that. It was a 12-0 start for Mizzou, and then both teams scored 98 points apiece after that, which absolutely was just mind-boggling that game went that way. And a huge shout-out again to Mizzou and Dennis Gates for dropping 110 in the highest-scoring SEC game they've ever had. But yeah, Bama's defense has got to tighten up. I mean, they got to tighten it up here, and it's going to be when you need to get a rebound game from your defense, the last team you want to see is Mark Pope in Kentucky. That's not an ideal situation for Bama to have to kind of figure out how to make some adjustments on the fly on the defensive end again. For Kentucky, Lamont Butler being out is more devastating for them defensively, but he's still an important part of what they do offensively as well. And I think for Kentucky, it is going to be a question of where do some of those points come from. We know they can get them, but they've been dealing with their lineup just hasn't been consistent lately because of the injuries. And even though I think Kentucky's more than capable of scoring close to 100 points against Alabama, the fact of the matter is they have to. They don't win this game if they don't score 95. Like, I think that sounds insane to say, but I think it's probably pretty close. Like, if Kentucky scores 95 on the road against Alabama, they maybe win, but it's not. It's in most of the time that's a guarantee. In this case, that's not a guarantee. So for Kentucky, their defense is not great. Bama's offense is going to do what Bama's offense does. So while I think Kentucky has the horses to win this basketball game, they're going to have to play close to their A game offensively in order to get in that conversation.
And let's remember, Alabama has lost 2 straight now to Auburn at home and then at Mizzou, and their schedule.
Yeah.
Hosting Kentucky, hosting Mississippi State, at Tennessee, hosting Florida, and at Auburn. Their final 3 games are all against not just top 10 teams, 1 or 2 seeds in the NCAA tournament. Andy, Alabama could legitimately take 2-3 more losses the rest of the way here, and that's crazy to think about.
Well, Isaac, do you want to know the best way to solidify your standing on the NCAA tournament bubble?
I would love to.
You got to knock off a ranked team. And we got 9 different bubbly teams. They have a chance to do exactly that this weekend. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on all of it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay right in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. It's great because when you win, you get paid instantly. We talked about that Michigan State game right now. The Wolverines, 2.5-point favorites at home over Sparty tonight. Might be fun to have a little action on that game. Right now, folks, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Isaac, we got a lot more to get to today on the show. We've only covered 4 of the 60 or so good college basketball games taking place this weekend. We're probably not going to get to another 55, but we'll get to as many of them as we can, starting with some of these bubble matchups and these opportunities for these teams that are kind of floating in that bubble conversation, whether they're legitimately listed on Lenardi's last 4 in, first 4 out, whether they're just 8 or 9 seeds that are kind of in a bubble position if they weren't able to win. We just kind of want to look at some of the best opportunities these teams have this weekend to kind of cement their status as an NCAA tournament team. And Isaac, we got quite a few of them here, most of them in the SEC. Not a surprise, as there's basically a whole bunch of teams hanging on to ranked spots in that conversation. But I wanted to start with the game in the Big 12, West Virginia at Texas Tech. I think looking through, making sure I'm not missing any, I think this is my favorite game of the day, with maybe the exception of BYU at Arizona, which I'm also very excited about. So 2 Big 12 matchups there. But this is a great opportunity for West Virginia, who's kind of been floating around that bubble. They picked up that win over Cincinnati, barely. In case anybody missed that game, by the way, West Virginia was up 9 with 9 seconds left. Dan Skillings hit back-to-back threes, made it a 3-point game with 4 seconds left. It was crazy. I thought Cincinnati was going to pull it off. They did not, unfortunately.
Hey, Andy, do you know what the line was in that game, by the way?
Oh, gosh. Was it 4.5 or something?
It was 3.5. Scott Van Pelt broke in with an immediate bad beats. He literally said, "We can't wait for Monday. We have to do this right now."
I did not know that, but yeah. I was watching that game because Gonzaga was playing afterwards, and I was like, this is the first time ever that Gonzaga's game is going to start on time. And then that happened, and I was like, are you? And then they reviewed it for 40 minutes, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most classic thing. Anyway, West Virginia survived that game. Now they have a chance on the road at Texas Tech. Very difficult place to win. West Virginia has a lot of really great wins this year. They have enough bad losses that they're still in that bubble conversation. The loss of Tucker DeVries, really devastating for them. A win here, though, cements yourself in the field, in my opinion. This game Saturday, 1 Eastern time on ESPN Plus, should be a really, really fun one out in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy for West Virginia to be able to do what they've done in the first year under Darren DeVries, and without Tucker playing most of the season, who really hope, by the way, he's able to get cleared for that medical red shirt next year. I mean, this team is one of the best stories in our entire sport this year. I've loved it. Texas Tech going to be plenty mad, though, coming off that loss at TCU earlier this week, looking to just remind everybody why they've done as well as they've had this year. But West Virginia obviously going to be in a desperate situation here. And I don't think they're screwed, if they can't get this win, because they were for last 4 buys in Lunardi's latest, but still a big time opportunity, Andy.
Well, let's talk about the other Big 12 game here, and then we'll get to the SEC games, and then we'll cover the rest of them here to close us out before we get to that Duke-Illinois matchup and some other fun stuff going on this weekend. But I really want to talk about this BYU at Arizona game. So BYU is going on the road to Tucson, take on Tommy Lloyd and the Wildcats, ranked 19th right now for Arizona. This game Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be on ESPN. BYU listed as a last 4 bye team. They're kind of in that conversation. They've been playing really good basketball as of late, which has really helped put them in a position to be on the bubble. They really weren't looking like that early in conference play, and have rattled off, I think, 3 straight now, and had won 4 straight prior to that after losing to before losing to Arizona and Cincinnati. The Cincinnati loss hurting them, the Utah loss hurting them. Obviously, with that one, it's a rivalry, so I think the committee kind of takes those into account. But for BYU, I mean, they got Arizona and Arizona State on the road, then they got West Virginia at home, then they close at Iowa State, and then another one of those rivalry matchups, this time against Utah. BYU's in a position where they do well here. Even if you lose the road games to Iowa State and Arizona, I think you're probably in the field. But folks, I mean, if you win this game, you go on the road, you beat Arizona on the road. I think you're really in a comfortable position at that point for Coach Kevin Young and this BYU team.
And Andy, what's crazy too, like looking at Big 12 standings, I hadn't realized this until real time. BYU has slid into 5th place in the Big 12. They're in front of both Kansas and Baylor right now. I mean, it's just another really good story. Really happy for Kevin Young. The year before he gets AJ DeBanza, by the way.
Right.
But you're spot on, man. Arizona has lost 2 of their last 3. Is it an issue of like they're struggling to figure some things out? Obviously, they beat Baylor in Waco earlier this week. So we'll just see what happens there. But yeah, this game is sneaky good, man. And BYU has a legitimate chance to win this thing. Despite the fact that Arizona is favored by 7 at home. Andy, as you said, let's go to the SEC games. We've got several of these. I'll rattle a couple off, and then we'll see where we want to go with it. Number 21, Mississippi State at Oklahoma. Sooners, man, they are in desperation mode just to find any win. I think, honestly, they're going to slide off the bubble. That game is Saturday, 1 Eastern, SEC Network. Number 24, Ole Miss at Vandy. Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on SEC Network. UGA at number 1 Auburn. You want to make a statement? There it is, Andy, for the Bulldogs. That one is at 4 p.m. on ESPN. And then the other one is number 15 Mizzou, coming off that massive win over Alabama. They are now headed to Fayetteville, Arkansas to face off with John Calipari. Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, another ESPN game. Andy, very, very intriguing stuff in the SEC in terms of the bubble. Here's how I want to ask you this question. Of these 4 SEC kind of bubble team against a ranked team, how many bubble teams win?
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask you, but I hadn't decided if I was going to, or I hadn't come up with my answer yet. I do not think Oklahoma wins even at home. I just don't think they're good enough. I think this is the loss that officially puts the kibosh on their chances of making the tournament, barring what would be quite a miracle run in the SEC tournament for them.
NC State says hi.
What's that?
NC State says hi, but
yes,
Oklahoma is not
absolutely.
NC State.
I do think Vandy could win this game. I think they have. I mean, they're at home. Ole Miss is a little, I don't want to say inconsistent, but they're beatable, especially when they're on the road. Vandy has we've seen some pretty inspired basketball from them as of late. I know they didn't win that Kentucky game, but they're not quite in desperation mode, but they're getting closer. And this is the kind of team you have to beat to be on the right side of the bubble out of the SEC. So I think they could win that game. I think I'll say yes. I don't think Georgia beats Auburn at Auburn. That's a really tough ask. No. I mean, again, what a way to put yourself squarely back on the bubble if they were to do it, but I just don't see it happening. The game I'm most excited about, though, out of these 4 is definitely Mizzou at Arkansas. Mizzou coming off a really big-time win over Alabama. Arkansas coming off a loss to Auburn in a game that they could have won. They took a lead with 3 minutes to go. They put themselves in a position, heartbreaking loss. They're feeling it. They're emotional. They know that they would have been, probably put themselves right in the field had they won that game against Auburn. They still have a chance to do it, but can you come off of that kind of loss to beat a steamrolling team in Missouri at home? That to me is a lot of intrigue and interest. I frankly would not be surprised at all if Arkansas won that game, if there's a little bit of a letdown for Missouri. So I'm going to say that Vandy and Arkansas win, and that Oklahoma and Georgia lose their games, and that Arkansas and Vandy then get a little bit more comfortable on the correct side of the bubble.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go, Andy. I think, in fact, I think that Arkansas even has a better chance than does Vandy just because of that emotional coming off that win for Mizzou. But I tell you what, on the flip side, I know this is a bubble conversation. This is a big time opportunity for Mizzou. I know Arkansas is not ranked. I know all that, but man, if they could follow up beating Alabama and say, look, we're this locked in that now we go in to Bud Walton and do that. Maybe a top 10 team. I think they'd be a top 10 team in the AP. If legitimately, dude.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's so cool what they're doing. I'm so happy for Dennis Gates after last year's winless SEC. By the way, Oklahoma, the only one team beneath them in the SEC standings is 0-13 South Carolina. Oklahoma is literally tied for next to last in the SEC with LSU at 3-10. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, Andy, 3 other of these games. one each in the ACC, Big Ten, and Big East. We got number 18 Clemson at SMU Saturday 4 p.m. Eastern on ACC Network. Number 13 Purdue at Indiana Sunday 1:30 Eastern on CBS, and then number 16 Marquette at Villanova tonight, actually, and that'll be on FS1. FanDuel has it Marquette -1. Andy, I know Villanova's not really a bubble team. We think they're off, but this could be a big opportunity to get it. The game that intrigues me the most out of this is the Purdue-Indiana game, right? Just because of the Indiana of it all, both the Hoosiers and the entire state, their basketball lovingness. For Indiana, things are headed in absolutely the wrong direction, but nothing would be greater than beating your rival Purdue in Assembly Hall to take care of stuff there. I don't know that the Hoosiers have it in them. They had a nice little rally the troops moment after the Woodson news, but that only lasts so long.
Yeah. Umar Ballo versus Trey Kaufman-Wren, really fun matchup in the front court there, but Purdue's guards just so much better than Indiana's guards. It's hard for me to imagine that the Hoosiers can muster up enough to win this game, even if it is a really important game for them in terms of being able to stay on the bubble. You got to win at home. And I think that kind of applies to a lot of these games. SMU, you got to win at home. You don't get very many big time opportunities to host good teams at your house in the ACC. This is one of those opportunities. When you don't get very many of those chances, you have to capitalize. If SMU isn't able to beat Clemson, I don't know that it's not like a death sentence, but it's when you don't have many opportunities, like I said, it makes it a lot more difficult to miss out on the ones that you do have. And so that's a really big game for SMU. Indiana hanging on by a thread. They want to win this game for a lot of reasons, but certainly staying in the bubble conversation. And then, I think Marquette's going to come in and win this one. I just don't know if Villanova's got the ponies to hang here with the Golden Eagles. But if they do, I do think that at least keeps that glimmer of hope alive for Villanova that, hey, maybe if we keep winning, if we have a little run in the Big East tournament, maybe we can be on that bubble conversation. But if you lose this game, again, a loss to Marquette, even at home, is not devastating, but they're just death by 1,000 paper cuts type situation for Villanova. I don't think they can come back from this if they don't win this one.
Andy, literally, as you were just talking, Lunardi refreshed his bracketology. So a couple quick things. Oklahoma has now dropped to first four out. We've been waiting on that for a while and finally happened. SMU is first four out. And then who are in Indiana is still next four out. So just a quick update on some of those teams. Now, long gone are the fun non-con games that we regularly got in February. But thanks to the tasty one last year that we had between Gonzaga and Kentucky, we got another one this year between Duke and Illinois. It's going to be great to happen this weekend. All coming up, that and more in just a second. Number 3, Duke and Illinois, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox inside the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. Woo, baby. Ken Palm has it, Duke -9. John Shire, Brad Underwood, we thank you for giving us this glorious non-con gem in late February.
This is going to be so fun. And
I'm so excited.
I know that, there's a mixture of people who listen to the show who consume college basketball, obviously just junkies who love college basketball, obviously team-specific fans. There's also a lot of people who like to watch college basketball for the NBA draft side of things. And I'll tell you what, this is the game of the day. This is the game that you're going to want to watch, not just for the Duke side of things, obviously with Cooper Flagg and Kaman Maluak and Con Knipple and Isaiah Evans and many others. Tyrese Proctor's played himself into that conversation. But for Illinois, you got fantastic players there. Kasparis Jakusionis, Will Riley has been playing very well as of late. It's just going to be a really fun game for the draft heads. It's going to be a fun game just to watch non-conference basketball again. It's always fun to kind of have that, like you said, like we got with Kentucky and Gonzaga last year, just get a little bit of a break where you're sort of, especially at this point when almost everybody in conference play has played each other once already, like there's a lot of great matchups this weekend. Don't get me wrong, but most of these teams have played each other. Obviously, that's part of what makes Iowa State and Houston extra exciting. But for this game in particular, like these teams, we wouldn't get to see these teams play each other. So I'm excited about it. Obviously, Illinois not being ranked wasn't on the bingo card. They were expected to be in that conversation, but this is still a good Illinois team. I'm not saying they deserve to be ranked, but it's not a. Frankly, a lot of the games that Duke has played lately have been a cakewalk. This certainly will not be a cakewalk for Duke. This is a very good Illinois team. I'm really excited to see how these two teams play in this game, how the young stars look, and just get a chance for a little bit of a fresh air breath here in late February.
And what a win it would be for Illinois, who that bracketology we just talked about, they are down to the 7 line and falling. And so, man, if they want to shore up where they're at and not fall into any sort of bubble conversation, This would be good for them because it's Duke and then Iowa. That's fine. But then they wrap Big Ten play with Michigan and Purdue, Andy, and those are not gimmies, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination. Next, Andy. Dan Hurley and Rick Pitino, round 2, UConn at number 10, St. John's, 12 Eastern on Fox on Sunday. Johnny's -8. Perhaps the story here is similar to the one we just talked about. This is also not a ranked on ranked matchup because UConn has dropped a couple here, and consequently, St. John's has a 3.5 game lead in the Big East over St. John's, a 2.5 game lead over both Marquette and Creighton. For UConn, I think they definitely need this win much more than St. John's does. They've lost 2 of their last 4, not just to the Johnnies, but then also let's remember to Seton Hall in overtime last Saturday. Andy, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one as well. 2 fun coaching matchups. Obviously, Rick Pitino, Danny Hurley, 2 of the big personalities in college basketball. And it's funny because, I'm with you that UConn obviously needs this game a lot more than St. John's. I mean, that's not even remotely debatable. St. John's could lose this game and still fairly comfortably win the Big East, which is an insane thing to be saying. Even with the knowledge that Rick Pitino teams do great in year 2, I don't think we expected St. John's to be in the driver's seat this comfortably at this point in the year. But I'm going to tell you right now, just because St. John's has less writing on this game doesn't mean that they're not out there very motivated to knock off Danny Hurley. That's what I love about the Big East. That's what I love about these big coaching personalities. They're not going to let themselves be like, well, it's okay if no, that's not going to be the mentality for Pitino, for the Johnnies, for UConn, anybody in this game. And I think that's what's going to make it so much fun. Liam McNeely, such an incredible player and so valuable to this UConn team at a level that I don't know that I would have been able to predict. And some of that is the fact that some of the players we expected to take a bigger leap for UConn haven't quite done that. Caravan's he's not a team. Like
he's not the dude.
Number one option. He's not a number one option. And that's what made those UConn teams so great prior to this year, was because he wasn't asked to be that. They don't have the same rim protection down low. And solo ball is very, very good, but he's a little bit more one-dimensional than somebody like Tristan Newton was. And so it's forced them to be really reliant on McNeely. And it was evident when he was out how much they missed him and kind of needed his skill set. I'm really excited to see what he does in this game. Obviously for St. John's, the guards with Devin Smith healthy, him and Kadari Richmond can both just put up like triple-double type numbers night in and night out. There's just a lot. I'm a big fan of Zuby Ejiofor. I say that every time we talk St. John's. And going up against this front, Johnson and Reed, it's going to be one of many very fun storylines in this contest on Fox.
This is McNeely's 5th game back, Andy. He's averaging 21.8 points a game since coming back. Has had 2 double-doubles and nearly almost a double-double in every one of them. How about this weird note I realized as we were putting these notes together? Assuming that Kansas falls out of the top 25 next week, assuming that UConn doesn't make it back in, there is the high likelihood that we will have no recent national champions in the AP top 25. You would, assuming things play out the way we think they will, you would have to go back to 2015 when Duke won for the last time the national champion is currently ranked in the AP poll, which I just think speaks, Andy, to the broader picture of where we're at in the portal era, of how hard it is to maintain top-level college basketball teams year after year after year after year. And I think that's a bigger conversation for another day, but it was just an interesting nugget that I noticed.
Yeah, and I would say, too, I know we saved the big conversation for later, but a lot of these teams were expected to be better, too. It's not like, the program, like Virginia, sure, people weren't expecting them to be in the conversation. Nova, I think people were expecting a little bit more from them, but it's not shocking. Like, if you told people Villanova's not ranked in late February, nobody would have been stunned. But they would be stunned about UConn. They would be stunned about Baylor. They would be stunned about North Carolina to an extent. Kansas, sure. Like that, the teams that were expected to be much better haven't been. And the parity in the sport is at an all-time high. All that stuff, like you said, but it's worth acknowledging that it's not even just like, those programs have fallen off. Like, no, they were expected to be good for the most part. And most of them have not lived up to those expectations.
You know what? Those 4 teams you just rattled off, I was like, wait a second. They were all 4 top 9 preseason teams. Kansas 1, UConn 3, Baylor 8, Carolina 9. Yeah. None of them are ranked. Yeah, that is crazy.
Well, we got another fun rivalry game, and then we got some bubble games that we can kind of rapid fire through here to close out the show. But we got St. Mary's at Gonzaga. Kind of falls in an odd spot in the season for these two teams. This game, by the way, Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN2. Ken Palm favoring the Zags at home by 5. Neither team is ranked. The St. Mary's has yet to be ranked this year, which is a bit of a crime. They lost to San Francisco. If they hadn't lost that game, I think they'd be in at this point. Gonzaga fell out of the rankings 6 weeks ago or so ago, hasn't been able to get back in. Either of these teams might potentially climb in with a win here. I think that probably puts them in that conversation, certainly depending what some of the other teams around them do. But neither team's ranked, but also neither team's on the bubble. Both teams feel fairly comfortably in the field at this point. A win for Gonzaga cements them in the NCAA tournament. A win for St. Mary's cements them as the WCC regular season champion. So there's still a lot on the line. It's a rivalry game. Absolutely nobody in Spokane wants to see St. Mary's celebrate winning a regular season title on Gonzaga's floor on senior night. I can promise you that. So there's still plenty to play for both these teams. But yeah, not quite as exciting of a game as it typically is from like an outsider perspective, but it's the best rivalry on the West Coast for a reason, and it's going to bring it on Saturday.
Yeah, still one I'm definitely going to be locked in on. Right now, Gonzaga is an 8 in Lunardi's latest bracket with St. Mary's as a 7. Andy, some other bubble action this weekend, 3 in the ACC. Wake Forest at NC State Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Lunardi has Wake Forest the last of the last 4 in, so they really need to win here in Raleigh to do this. NC State, Andy, they go from, we talked about them earlier in the show, winning the ACC tournament last year. They ain't even going to probably make it this year because now in the expanded ACC, bottom 3 teams are out. The next one is Pitt at Notre Dame. Pitt has actually climbed a little bit further back into Lunardi's bubble. They are in next 4 out. That game is Saturday, 2:15 on the C-Dub. And then we've got Virginia at North Carolina Saturday at 4 p.m. on ESPN2. North Carolina is the last of Lunardi's first 4 out. And so all 3 of these ACC teams that we just talked about really need a win here. Andy, one that really intrigues me is George Mason at VCU, Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. VCU right now has moved into Lunardi's new field. Last 4 in. They were first 4 out last time, so that's big. And this is not just a bubbly important game, but an A10 first place game. And here's why it matters. George Mason is 12-1 right now, VCU 11-2. This is the only regular season matchup between these two, Andy. And it kind of means more in some ways for George Mason because they don't really have an at-large resume if they don't win the A10's AQ. So really, honestly, very intrigued by this game. Andy, we got a couple others. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I think the ACC teams pretty much all have to win. I don't think there's. I think at this point, Pitt, if you lose at Notre Dame, I think you're done. I don't think there's enough there. NC State's such a bad loss at this point for Wake that they're done if they don't win it. And for North Carolina, I think they've been in that position as well already. And Virginia, is I guess better than Notre Dame and NC State. Not much, but for North Carolina, they're at home. If they lose that game, that's a really big problem for them. And then you got. I was a little surprised that Lunardi didn't move Boise State up more after their win over New Mexico. Like he's still got Oklahoma as a first 4 out. He's got Boise State as a next 4 out. I'd probably flip those two personally at this point. But for Boise State, you go win at Nevada and you're even more comfortable, in my opinion, at least. I think they've already beat Nevada this year. So you sweep Nevada, you win that one on the road. I think that puts them in a really comfortable spot. San Diego State's got a real big opportunity as well to go out to Logan and beat Utah State. 2 teams that are both in the field right now, but San Diego State's been very kind of right on that bubble conversation. He's one of the last 4 buys, according to Lunardi right now. They need some big wins. This would be an opportunity to pick up a big win. Whichever team loses this game is going to be feeling a lot more strain. Again, for San Diego State, it's not a bad loss to lose on the road to a really, really good team, but they just don't have a lot of wiggle room in their resume right now. And then we got Texas at South Carolina. Again, South Carolina hasn't won a game in the SEC. Texas cannot be the team that lets them have their first win, but it's a road game for the Longhorns, so it's not necessarily easy. South Carolina is not even that bad of a team for having the record that they do. It's just a product of the SEC. But for Texas, this is the kind of game that you have to win. Similar to the other ACC games, Texas got to have this one. If they don't have this one, they're going to be really sweaty on Selection Sunday unless they can make a big run in the SEC tournament.
Andy, just a couple other quick things, and then you can get us out of here. We already mentioned earlier USC losing at Maryland 88-71. Northwestern went to Columbus and obliterated the Buckeyes 70-49. Not good for Ohio State. I didn't even check where Lunardi moved them following on the 8-9 line. Yeah, they've fallen off of that. Are they at 10 now? West Virginia, San Diego State. Nebraska and Ohio State fell to a 10. Okay, so that's really interesting. UC Irvine was on the bubble next four out. They lose to Cal State Northridge. I hate it for them, but they are now done. And then San Francisco just does what they need to do to stay on the wrong side of the bubble, but to not fall completely off of it. A couple other ranked games: Oregon at number 11, Wisconsin noon on Saturday, FSU at 25, Louisville, Oklahoma State at Kansas. Jayhawks, do not mess around. And then on Sunday, as it seems like they always play, number 22 Memphis hosts FAU. The Owls are not as good in the post Dusty May era.
Well, folks, we're going to have the great Locked On College Basketball Game Night show Saturday night after most of this action is over. Leaf Tulane, our good friend, our regular host on College Basketball Game Night, he's going to be hosting that show Saturday night again to recap all of this insane action, to get you ready for some of that Sunday action as well. And then Isaac and I will be back next week, of course, to give you the big picture. What does this mean for the seeding? What does this mean for certain bubble teams? We'll get to all that next week. But folks, as always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until Saturday night, check out the game night episode. And until Monday for both of us, peace out.